The Battle of Fort Sumter was the very first battle of the American Civil War. It was also a bloodless beginning what would become an incredibly bloody war. Throughout the late 1840s and on through the 50s, the North and South of the United States was divided on many points, such as the issue of slavery and states' rights. By 1860, these issues were boiling over the top in Congress, and a few of the southern states were threatening to secede from the Union if Abraham Lincoln, a Republican who was against the expansion of slavery, was elected. In the presidential election of 1860, 4 candidates ran, Breckinridge and Bell for the South, and Lincoln and Douglas for the North. In the end, Abraham Lincoln won the presidency, and in response, South Carolina on December 20, 1860, seceded from the Union. Almost immediately, South Carolina begins to take control of all federal installations in the state. Seeing this, Major Robert Anderson, who is in command of the Union soldiers in Charleston Harbor, decides to move all 80 of his men into Fort Sumter on the night of December 25th. Unfortunately for Anderson, Fort Sumter is only a partially constructed fort made of bricks and built on a man-made island in the middle of Charleston Harbor, as well as containing very little supplies. Meanwhile, South Carolina militia quickly take control of other forts and batteries in the harbor, including Cummings Point Battery, Fort Moultrie, and Fort Johnson, and send a request to Washington for the surrender of Fort Sumter as well. Even though Abraham Lincoln has been elected, he would not be inaugurated until March 4th, so the situation at Fort Sumter falls to President James Buchanan, who does have the courage to deny the surrender request. Buchanan wishes to leave it at that, but upon receiving word that the fort is low on supplies and manpower, he is forced to send the ship Star of the West with food and 200 reinforcements for Sumter. However, on January 9th, when attempting to enter the harbor, the ship is fired upon by Confederates and is forced to turn back. By March, South Carolina has been joined by 6 more seceding states: Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas. These states form the Confederate States of America, with the capital in Montgomery, Alabama. The new government appoints General P.G.T. Beauregard to take command of all the Confederate troops now amassing in Charleston Harbor, and give him the task of taking Fort Sumter. Beauregard then orders the construction of several forts and batteries around the harbor, until he has surrounded Sumter in what he calls a ring of fire. On April 4th, Abraham Lincoln, now the U.S. President, sends word to the Confederate government that he is going to attempt to resupply Fort Sumter with only provisions, for the men inside the fort are beginning to starve with hunger. In reply, Jefferson Davis, who is the Confederate president, orders General Beauregard to demand the surrender of Fort Sumter. The next day, April 8th, Beauregard sends 3 delegates to Sumter with the surrender request. Anderson declines and reports that he will be forced to evacuate by the 15th due to lack of food. However, Beauregard is not ready to wait that long, and in the early morning of April 12th, he ordered firing on Fort Sumter. At 4:30 a.m., a shell fired from Fort Johnson arcs over the harbor and explodes over Fort Sumter. This was the very first shot fired during the American Civil War, and before long, every Confederate gun in the harbor was pounding Fort Sumter. Major Anderson does not return fire until 7 a.m. However, he is only able to fire with his lower guns in fear of exposing his men.
Return fire. Give it to him. Fire! Fire! Fire!
Before long, eager Charlestonians begin to watch this firework show from their rooftops.
Fire! Reload! Keep it coming!
Fire!
Reload! For more than 33 hours, the guns roar, but at 2 p.m. on April 13th, with fires breaking out in the fort and the ammunition and food supply running critically low, the American flag is lowered at Fort Sumter. It would not be raised again for another 4 bloody years. Despite the heavy cannon fire, the only casualty of the battle occurred during a 100-gun salute to the American flag, when a bundle of cartridges exploded, killing one Union gunner and wounding several others. After this, the Union garrison left for the north, and the Confederates then occupied the fort. A few days later, Abraham Lincoln calls for 75,000 volunteers to put down the rebellion. This drives 4 more states into the Confederacy: Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee, and North Carolina. With soldiers massing on both sides, the stage is now set for the bloodiest war in American history.